guess it just goes to show how much of a mega star she's become. Looking forward to next year's World Cup, how huge is she going to be for Australia?
Absolutely massive, and I would say in two parts to that question, on and off the pitch. There's no doubt she's one of the best strikers in the world. For us, we've got a very strong strategy off the pitch for the Matildas, and taking them from being a domestic brand to a global brand, and having the likes of these partners on board, not only these partners but Nike, elevating Sam's profile up with the likes of Neymar and Mbappe, helps us really build the brand here back in Australia. So you're going to see the Disney docuseries coming out, and they're really becoming mainstream. We're lucky enough to have Ellie Carpenter in the country at the moment. Unfortunately for her, she's injured, but we've got players now playing in Champions League finals. This is really going to bode well for the Matildas' chances next year.
Given what these girls are achieving on a global scale, you said them ahead of the World Cup, what does that do to get on the seat for the World Cup and get young girls playing?
Yeah, it's one of the challenges we have is that they're not in the country a lot, so we really try to utilise and balance high performance commercial outcomes and building the brand here in Australia. So you'll see, we'll play some away. We played the last couple of matches, we rested players. We think that will be really good for us coming into this series in September against Canada. We'll have players that are mentally rested, physically rested. And for us, this is super important. There's only 5-6 windows up until the World Cup. They're very small moments in time you get with our players, so every opportunity will count. And you're going to start to see some really great opponents that we bring home. That scarcity, I think, helps drives the ticket sales, and that's why, in a week's notice, we've sold 20,000 tickets for both matches. So it's not hard selling tickets to the Matildas at the moment.
Just final one from me. Canada have done so well in recent years. What can you tell us about them ahead of the future?
Yeah, they're always a really great side collectively. They play together well. I think that obviously Christine Sinclair's I think she is the most capped player, male or female, in the world, scored the most goals, and she's always going to be a real threat up top, no matter, what her age is. But Olympic champions, you don't do that by chance. So it's going to be a really good test for the Matildas. Unlike a European or an Asian team, they actually play us at our own games, so that's going to be a really interesting matchup. But real good, solid preparation for the team as we lead into next year. Thank you. We do, yeah. There's a lot on the horizon that we're looking at the moment. I think it's been well documented lately, but I think there's hosting the Women's World Cup here on home soil, the Men's World Cup in November, although it's offshore. We all know that we have a football-mad country when it comes to World Cups, and I think everyone gets behind both their teams. So, with 1 billion people expected to watch the Women's World Cup, I think it will be a really good stepping stone to the 2032 Olympics. And as part of our legacy plan, we want to start to build out the infrastructure around football to make sure that we're football ready for that 2032 Olympics. So there's plenty of, there's a Rugby World Cup, a Basketball World Cup, and we think we're going to play a big part in building the infrastructure and everything we need for that Olympics. On the ground, so it's 5 key pillars: legacy, leadership and development, community facilities, infrastructure, more women in the game. It's all underpinned by us achieving 50-50 participation by 2027. It's a very, very bold target. I often get asked if it's realistic, and I think if we all mobilise behind it, it is. Queensland, you might not know, is now our second participated state for football in the country. It's just surpassed Victoria. There is still more room for growth, but for us, we need better community facilities infrastructure for our football clubs, and we have to enhance the ones we have. Sadly, only 35% of our community facilities are considered female-friendly. That's a challenge for us if we want to get more girls and women playing the game. And to reach that target, we're going to need an extra 400,000 women and girls playing the game. It's bold, but I think we can do it, particularly with the Matildas creating the visibility and Football Queensland here on the ground doing great things. Thank you.
Yeah, you guys. You don't need to hang around with him. Look, this was a Triple C investigation and was investigated by the Triple C. It was one of the matters that the former minister took into account in sacking those councillors, and so it has been considered and action has been taken. Of course, since then, one of those councillors has been re-elected, and he will need to speak for himself about his own actions. Well, it was extraordinary. You know, if you think of the lives of people in Ipswich, they're not well-off folk, and they're paying their rates, expecting councillors to represent them and to act in their best interests, and clearly they weren't.
Will you be seeking any legal advice about whether the state government should take action?
Well, I'm advised that the state government did take action, that it was one of the matters taken into account when the minister took what is one of the harshest actions a minister can take, and that is to sack democratically elected councillors. That action was not taken lightly. It was taken in consideration of the gravity of the allegations made against those councillors, including of these lavish trips. I don't know how you could do that in practical terms. Obviously, those who received those benefits should consider whether they should contribute those funds back. But it's not as if you can reverse the charges, unfortunately. This is money that was taken from Ipswich ratepayers. It shouldn't be. We've made many changes since then to increase accountability so that ratepayers can be aware what their funds are being spent on, including greater regulation of council-controlled third-party entities.
There's been a suggestion that legislation could be enacted to force people who are on those trips to repay the money. Is that something you'll seek further advice? Do you know if it's possible, and would you do it?
It strikes me that that would be very hard to do. The funds have been spent. They're not there to be recouped any longer. Councillors like Councillor Tully could or should consider whether they should pay back some of those funds. I'd certainly urge them to consider that. But at the end of the day, these are funds that were expended 10 years ago. I'm not sure there's a practical way the state government could recoup them. Well, he was re-elected. He was elected after having been sacked by voters in his ward. You've got to remember that each level of government is elected in their own right, and so some weight needs to be put behind the fact that he was democratically elected. But I would expect that now that there is even more information to hand, his task of re-electing himself next time might be even harder. If it was up to me, then yes. But rightly so, these decisions aren't up to me. There's been a lot of debate recently about whether the Information Commissioner's decisions should be independently made or whether they should be questioned. And we have, I think, all agreed that the Information Commissioner should be able to make these decisions. That's why it's not up to me. You wouldn't want it to be up to me. It's up to the Information Commissioner, and they've made those decisions. Look, that's a question you'd have to refer to the state secretary. The matter has been investigated by the Triple C. No further action has been taken. This is a question of not necessarily what was legal or not, but what was right or wrong. There's been no further advice since the update I provided, I think, a few weeks ago, which was that now that she had stood aside, if any action had have been appropriate at that stage, it would have been to stand her aside. So there was no need for further advice at that stage because she had voluntarily taken the action, the only action, the harshest action that advice would have recommended.
This is just on the COVID situation. There seems to be some confusion, I guess, with the advice coming from the government. We have the federal chief medical officer. Is that the advice?
I understand why this is confusing, and I think there is some unfortunate crossing of messages. The official health advice received by us from the Australian government has not changed, and that is that if you can safely, so I want to be really clear about this. So there has been no new advice from AHPPC. Statements yesterday were reflective of advice from earlier this month. Go to work unless you're sick or in a vulnerable category. The federal government has not told their own staff to work from home, which I guess is one of the best indicators that their current advice remains the same. We would, of course, urge anyone who's sick to stay home and get tested. And even if they're negative, if they're still sick, they should still stay home. Have a mask with you at all times. There is a lot of COVID in the community right now, and there is a lot of people in hospital with COVID. The best way you can avoid spreading it is all of those hygiene measures that we've been talking about all this time, as well as having a mask with you. We have 9,650 new COVID cases, 158 new flu cases. Tragically, 15 people died from COVID in the last 24 hours and 5 people died from the flu. There are 922 patients in hospital with COVID and 49 with the flu. So we continue to encourage people to make decisions in the best interests of their health and those around them.
Given those statistics, why is the state government not doing daily press conferences like we were previously? This is one of the worst ways we can.
Well, we do daily press conferences and we answer questions about COVID pretty much every day, and we'll continue to do so. Continue to make sure Queenslanders are well informed. People's interests in these matters have ebbed and flowed throughout the last 2.5 years, but we're certainly keen to continue to provide all of the information that we possibly can. Queensland continues to be the powerhouse of supply for gas for the nation, as well as exporting it around the world. We continue to send to other states significant amounts of gas, but I'm advised that our gas producers are well equipped to meet our local demand, as well as what we export as LNG and what we pipe to the other states.
Queenslanders expect to prepare for release some restrictions. I appreciate public safety take that advice. But given that the situation is worsening, everyone's accepting that. Should there be at least some acceptance of some restrictions made?
We've always said that we will continue to receive briefings on what the situation is and what appropriate public health measures we should take, and we will take that advice. We always have. We've been criticised for it from both those who think we've gone too far and those who didn't think we went far enough, but we have always steadfastly taken the health advice, and the advice we have right now hasn't changed.
Yes, the difficulty is you have the chief health officer saying for the year and that's just not passed. It's now pressing responsibility. And a few months later we have it's part of the advice of the hospital where it must be hospital. So you accept that there is a welcome back if that was the year of restrictions, those sort of restrictions.
The situation continues to change. The virus continues to change. The protective barrier of immunisation continues to change, and that's why we continue to have new advice about boosters and that kind of thing. The strongest mandate measures were always designed to be in place to protect people until we had a vaccine. That was what we always said, that those measures were there to protect people until they had a choice to get a vaccine. Now that we have a vaccine, the set of measures that we put in place are necessarily different, because this is the situation, this kind of situation is going to continue now ongoing. And so the measures that we put in place need to be the kinds of measures that we can continue to implement when we see these waves. Not recent advice, but what I know is that all of our hospitals have surge plans that have been very carefully put in place over the last couple of years, and this number of hospitalisations, while high, is well within the range that has been anticipated by that surge planning. That means our hospitals, they know what to do with this number of patients. There are different trigger points within that surge planning that would trigger different actions. They've already taken some of those, so the early actions relate to planned care and the rescheduling of planned care. So they have those measures in place, and while this is undoubtedly a very significant load on the system, it is well within the range of expectation for our hospital surge planning.
How high is the range for the surge planning? I mean, how much can the surge planning accommodate?
So the surge plans go well beyond what we would ever expect and what we have experienced. As you would expect, our hospitals are prepared for every eventuality, even the most unlikely. And so there are measures in place at different thresholds dependent on the load on the hospital. It's not purely dependent on the number of beds. It also includes number of ICU treatment spaces, the number of staff off sick or furloughed. So all of those things need to be taken into account. Sorry? I'm not as up to date on the briefing as I was for most of the pandemic, Joel, but when the health minister's next up, I'm sure she'll be able to outline that for you.
When you're saying the surge plans go well beyond what we expect, how far do they go? Is it 2,000 people in hospital, 3,000 people, 10% of staff off sick? What is it?
I don't have to hand those exact numbers, but I recall from the time that we were working on them that they considered all of the situations that we were seeing in other countries and that we are now highly unlikely to experience here. So we were looking at the early data out of Italy, out of the United States, out of the United Kingdom, and that was informing the number of cases we could have expected. That was many, many more cases than we currently have. So the hospital surge planning can and does take that into account. Of course, the rates of very serious illness are much lower now than we were expecting when we were first preparing in 2020 because so many people are now vaccinated. So all of those things have been taken into account.
What about regional council, like city council? What's the process of that?
So I've discussed that with the Mayor. I live in Moreton Bay Regional Council and my electorate is in Moreton Bay, so I've taken a close interest in it. He certainly thinks that it would better tell people the story of our region and be more easily identifiable. I think that has merit. They've done community consultation. I understand the council made a decision yesterday. I think the next step for me is to refer it to the Local Government Change Commission. They will then run a process and provide final advice back to government.
I imagine it costs money, right? Just change the name. Is it a valuable use of money at the time when
Yeah, the advice I have from the Mayor is that the costs involved are minimal and that the ability to refer to Moreton Bay as a city will help in their business promotion and attraction activities, in describing the region, in their tourism marketing, that kind of thing. So that's all what the Change Commission will take into account in making a decision and providing that advice back.
just the mayor's release or spoken
Look, it's all pretty strange to me. This is a LNP branch member supposedly secretly recording something the Mayor claims she heard from me in a confidential discussion about not leaking things to the media. The question of what the Mayor said, that really needs to be put to her. The question of LNP branch members secretly recording her and providing that to the media, well, that's a question for the LNP. I know that's something that the Labor Party would take quite seriously. What I can assure you of is that I never had any concerns about fully briefing our state MPs for a number of reasons. One is that they were fully briefed and did keep the information confidential, and all of the parties to those negotiations were required to sign sign confidentiality arrangements. If the Lord Mayor, as the negotiating representative, was briefing other mayors within the Council of Mayors, then there was a requirement there for that to be confidential. And as the lead negotiator, it's the Lord Mayor's job to raise that with the Mayor of Ipswich. But I can underline that I had no such concerns. Why the Mayor would have embellished a story like that to her branch, well, she'll need to answer that question, and the matter of it being recorded and elsewhere disclosed, that's a question for the LNP. Oh, look, it's very hard in these kinds of roles to not be able to have frank conversations. It's very hard if people then seek to report conversations and embellish conversations in other forums where they certainly shouldn't be. It's ironic that in this case it was supposedly about the leaking of confidential information. Of course it makes it harder to do your job when you know people are going to treat your conversations that way. Yeah. Not that I'm across, but I do keep in touch with people working on improving vaccines and vaccine effectiveness, and I think we should expect that technology to continue to improve. It was an incredible feat to get a vaccine as quickly as we did and as effective and safe as we have had, and that's going to inform vaccine technologies for a wide range of other viruses too. We will, of course, rush to get people the best vaccines suitable for them according to the ATAGI advice as soon as we possibly can.
Would you like to see the health officer and put more information out there and have more press conferences?
It's a hard question to answer. I feel like we've been very accessible on these questions and all of the questions folk have, both in these kinds of forums and elsewhere.
The issue is we used to have data press conferences. FIFA has missed that rule, and now there's past enough conversations. So the only way of getting this proactively into the show is it an attempt to give the impression that we are living with COVID and not ramp up certain processes?
Well, I wouldn't characterise it as that conscious of a decision, Joel. I think we have government press conferences pretty much every day. We're usually equipped to answer the questions that people have. We provide advice through the day in response to other questions. I guess there was a period of time where COVID was the only thing people were talking about and the only thing people wanted to ask questions about. I think that time has moved on, but obviously we continue to do the health response as well as everything else government needs to do. And by having a government press conference most days, we're able to do both.
One last football question.
A football question.
Yes, well, we're talking about football, obviously, football behind a legacy. What kind of legacy do you expect from the government from the World Cup? And probably will be so for that matter, given that football is the biggest growing event at the Olympic Games.
Well, you just heard from Sarah how we're seeing such a surge of participation in football here in Queensland, and we want to see that continue. In part, that's been driven by a take-up of football by girls, and it's a great sport for girls and young women and older women to play. We've been working with all of the codes, but particularly Football Queensland, to upgrade facilities to make sure that they are appropriate for both men and women, boys and girls, and we'll continue to do that. I think that will be a great legacy of having the Women's World Cup here next year. We'll see more players, more demand for those facilities. We'll continue to invest in those facilities, and of course, seeing the Matildas play next year. Well, there'll be lots of young girls who can look at that and do the math and work out that they could play here in 2032, and so I'm sure that will drive lots more young women to get involved. Oh, of course, we'd love to. We expect that between now and the 2032 games and beyond, as people see what great facilities we have, what great sport participation we have, and what a sport-loving place we are and state we are, that we'll continue to see even more of the world's biggest events here. That's one of the benefits of being an Olympic host city. Thank you.